The fever had been burning through Emma Coleman's body for 3 days straight, but the crops would not wait for weakness, and neither would the landlord who would come demanding his share come harvest time. She dragged herself through the cornfield under the brutal New Mexico sun, her hands trembling as she pulled weeds from between the stalks that towered over her slight frame, each movement sending waves of dizziness through her skull. The year was 1883, and in Hachita, survival meant working until your body gave out, then finding a way to work some more. Emma stumbled, catching herself against a corn stalk that bent under her weight. Sweat poured down her face, mixing with tears she refused to acknowledge. She was 22 years old and alone in this unforgiving territory. Her father dead from consumption 2 winters past, her mother following him into the ground just 6 months later. The small farm was all she had left, 10 acres of stubborn earth that fought her every day, and if she lost it, she would have nothing. No family, no prospects, no future. The sun beat down mercilessly as she forced herself to continue down the row. Her vision blurred, the green stalks swimming together into an indistinct mass. She had not eaten since yesterday morning, her stomach too unsettled to keep anything down, but she had forced herself to drink water from the well before dawn. That felt like a lifetime ago now. Emma heard hoofbeats approaching, but did not stop working. Probably someone passing through on their way to the main road. She kept her head down, pulling another weed, then another. The hoofbeats stopped somewhere behind her, but she ignored them, focusing every bit of her remaining strength on the task at hand. "Madam, you all right out here?" The voice was deep, concerned, with a slight drawl that marked the speaker as someone who had spent time further south, maybe Texas. Emma straightened slowly, her back protesting, and turned to see a man on horseback watching her from the edge of the field. He was tall even sitting down, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that curled slightly beneath his worn hat. His face was tanned and weathered but young, maybe 25 or 26. His eyes were a startling blue, and they were fixed on her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. "I am managing just fine, thank you," Emma said, her voice coming out rougher than she intended. She cleared her throat. "Just working my field." The cowboy dismounted in one smooth motion, and Emma noticed the way he moved, controlled and confident, like a man used to physical labor. He wore dusty trail clothes, and a well-maintained revolver hung at his hip. He approached the fence line but did not cross it, which she appreciated. Too many men in this territory did not understand boundaries. "Madam, I do not mean to be forward, but you look like you are about to fall over," he said, his voice gentle. "Are you sick?" "That is none of your concern," Emma said, turning back to her work. The world tilted dangerously, and she had to close her eyes for a moment to steady herself. "I am making it my concern," the cowboy said. "When was the last time you ate something?" "I said it is none of your business," Emma replied, more sharply than she intended. "Now, if you will excuse me, I have work to do." She bent to pull another weed, and the world went black around the edges. Her knees buckled, and she felt herself falling, but before she hit the ground, strong arms caught her. The cowboy had vaulted the fence and crossed the distance between them in seconds. He held her upright with surprising gentleness, and Emma found herself looking up into those blue eyes now filled with worry. "Easy there," he said softly. "I have got you." "Let me go," Emma protested weakly, but she did not have the strength to push him away. "I have to work." "The crops will not tend themselves." "The crops can wait," the cowboy said firmly. "You need rest, and you need food, and you need someone to look after you before you kill yourself out here in this heat." Emma wanted to argue, but another wave of dizziness washed over her, and she found herself leaning against his chest, her legs unable to support her weight. She smelled dust and leather and horse, and underneath that, something clean and masculine that was not entirely unpleasant. "I cannot afford to rest," she whispered. "If I do not work, I lose the farm. If I lose the farm, I have nothing." The cowboy looked down at her, and something in his expression shifted. "What is your name?" he asked. "Emma," she said. "Emma Coleman." "Emma Coleman," he repeated. "My name is Daniel Morrison, and I am going to help you whether you want me to or not." Before she could protest, he swept her up into his arms as if she weighed nothing at all. Emma gasped, instinctively putting her arms around his neck to steady herself. "Put me down," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Not a chance," Daniel said. He carried her toward the small farmhouse at the edge of the field, moving carefully through the corn rows. "Where is your family, your husband?" "Dead," Emma said flatly. "Father died 2 years ago. Mother last spring. No husband, no siblings, just me." Daniel's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. When they reached the farmhouse, he pushed the door open with his boot and carried her inside. The interior was clean but sparse, just the bare necessities. He set her down gently on the only bed, a narrow cot in the corner of the single room that served as bedroom, kitchen, and living space all at once. "When did you last see a doctor?" Daniel asked, placing his hand against her forehead. His touch was cool compared to her burning skin. "Cannot afford a doctor," Emma said. "It is just a fever. It will pass." "Just a fever," Daniel repeated, shaking his head. "You are burning up. Where do you keep your food?" Emma gestured weakly toward the small wooden cupboard near the stove. Daniel opened it and found it nearly empty, just some flour, a small amount of salt, and a tin of beans that was maybe half full. His expression darkened. "This is all you have?" he asked. "It is enough," Emma said defensively. "I make do." "You are starving yourself," Daniel said bluntly. He looked around the small house, taking in the worn furniture, the patched clothes hanging from pegs on the wall, the general air of poverty that hung over everything. "How long has it been like this?" "Since Mother died," Emma admitted. "She was the one who could make something out of nothing." "I try, but the farm barely produces enough to pay the landlord's share, and what is left has to last until next harvest." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I am going to go get some supplies. You stay in that bed and rest. Do not even think about getting up and going back out to that field." "I cannot accept charity," Emma said, trying to sit up. The room spun and she fell back against the thin pillow. "It is not charity," Daniel said. "It is common decency. Now rest." He left before she could argue further, and Emma heard his horse ride away at a gallop. She wanted to get up, wanted to prove she did not need help from a stranger, but her body would not obey. The fever had sapped every ounce of her strength. She closed her eyes just for a moment and fell into an uneasy sleep. When she woke, the light through the small window had changed, suggesting several hours had passed. Daniel was back, moving quietly around the small kitchen area. The smell of cooking meat made her stomach growl despite the nausea. "You are awake," Daniel said, noticing her open eyes. "Good, I have got some broth going. Think you can keep it down?" "You came back," Emma said, surprised. "Said I would, did I not?" Daniel replied. He brought over a steaming bowl and helped her sit up, propping her against the wall with the pillow behind her back. "Drink this slowly. Small sips." The broth was warm and savory, made with real beef and vegetables. Emma sipped it carefully, and to her relief, her stomach accepted it. Daniel watched her with those intense blue eyes, making sure she did not try to drink too fast. "Where did you get all this?" Emma asked between sips. "Town store," Daniel said. "Got you some meat, potatoes, vegetables, more flour, eggs, coffee, enough to last you a few weeks at least." "I told you I cannot accept charity," Emma protested. "And I told you it is not charity," Daniel said patiently. Consider it payment. Payment for what? For letting me work your farm while you recover, Daniel said. He sat down in the rickety chair by the table, stretching his long legs out in front of him. I am between jobs right now. Was working a cattle drive up from Texas, got paid out when we reached Las Cruces. Been drifting since then, looking for my next opportunity. Your farm needs work and you need help. Seems like a fair trade to me. I cannot pay you, Emma said. Did I ask for pay? Daniel countered. Look, Miss Coleman, I am not trying to take advantage. I am just trying to help someone who clearly needs it. You can argue with me if you want, but you are too sick and too tired to win, and we both know it. Emma wanted to be angry, wanted to maintain her pride, but she was so tired of fighting everything alone. Why would you do this for a stranger? She asked quietly. Daniel was silent for a moment, his expression distant. My sister died 3 years back, he said finally. She was sick, and she would not stop working because she thought she had to take care of everyone else. By the time we realized how bad it was too late. When I saw you out there in that field, burning up with fever but still trying to work, you reminded me of her. I could not save her, but maybe I can help you. Emma felt tears prick at her eyes. I am sorry about your sister, she said. Me too, Daniel said. So are we agreed? You rest and let me provide, at least until you are back on your feet. Emma looked at him, this stranger who had appeared out of nowhere and insisted on helping her. Everything in her upbringing told her to refuse, to maintain her independence, to not accept help from a man she barely knew. But the practical part of her, the part that knew she was at the end of her strength, won out. All right, she said softly. But just until I recover, then I can manage on my own again. We will see, Daniel said, but he said it with a small smile that took the edge off the words. Over the next 3 days, Daniel worked the farm from sunup to sundown while Emma slowly recovered her strength. He brought her meals at regular intervals, always something warm and nourishing. He tended the corn, weeded the vegetable garden, repaired the fence where it had started to sag, and fixed the leak in the roof she had been meaning to patch for months. In the evenings, he sat in the chair by her bed and they talked. Emma learned that Daniel was 26, the youngest of 4 children. He had grown up on a ranch in Texas, but after his father died and his brother inherited everything, he had struck out on his own. He had worked various jobs over the past 5 years, cattle drives mostly, but also some time as a deputy in a small town in Arizona, until he realized law enforcement was not his calling. He was good with horses, good with his hands, and had a steady, reliable nature that Emma found herself trusting more each day. Daniel learned that Emma had been born in Missouri, but came west with her parents when she was 15, looking for opportunity and land. They had settled in Hachita because the land was cheap, and her father thought he could make something of it. It had been hard work from the start, but they had managed until her father got sick. After he died, her mother had tried to keep things going, but grief and exhaustion had worn her down. Emma had been on her own for 6 months now, and every day was a struggle. By the 4th day, Emma's fever had broken completely, and she felt well enough to get out of bed. Daniel tried to insist she rest another day, but she was restless and tired of being an invalid. She made her way outside in the late afternoon and found him working in the vegetable garden, his shirt sleeves rolled up, sweat glistening on his forearms as he carefully tended her struggling tomato plants. You are spoiling them, Emma said, and Daniel looked up, a smile breaking across his face when he saw her. Look who is up and about, he said. Should you be out of bed? I feel much better, Emma said. It was true. The rest and regular meals had done wonders, though she still felt weak. Thank you for everything you have done. I would have lost everything if you had not stopped that day. Happy to help, Daniel said, standing up and brushing dirt from his hands. "But you are not back to full strength yet. Another few days before you should be doing heavy work." Emma looked around the farm and was amazed at what she saw. The fields looked better than they had in months, the vegetables were thriving, and even the old barn looked sturdier. "You have done so much," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Had time on my hands," Daniel said, but she could see he was pleased by her reaction. "Still some things that need doing, if you will let me stay on a bit longer." Emma looked at him, this kind stranger who had helped her without asking for anything in return. He was standing there in the golden afternoon light, and she realized with a start that she did not want him to leave. Not just because he was helpful, but because she enjoyed his company. Enjoyed the sound of his voice in the evenings, the way he made her laugh with stories from his travels, the way she felt safe knowing he was there. "I would like that," she said softly, "if you want to stay." "I want to stay," Daniel said, and the way he looked at her made her heart skip a beat. The next few weeks fell into a comfortable rhythm. Emma's strength returned gradually, and she started helping with the lighter farm work. Daniel handled the heavy labor, and together they managed to get the farm into better shape than it had been in years. They worked side by side during the day, and in the evenings they sat outside and watched the sun set over the desert landscape, talking about everything and nothing. Emma found herself looking forward to those evening conversations more than anything else. Daniel had a way of listening that made her feel heard, really heard for the first time in years. He did not try to solve all her problems or tell her what to do. He just listened, and when he did offer advice, it was thoughtful and practical. She also found herself noticing other things about him. The way his eyes crinkled when he laughed, the strength in his hands when he helped her over rough ground, the way he always seemed to know when she was pushing herself too hard and would gently insist she take a break. The sound of his voice when he sang quietly while he worked, old trail songs from his cattle driving days. One evening about a month after Daniel had first arrived, they were sitting outside watching the stars come out. The air had finally cooled after another scorching day, and Emma had made biscuits with the flour Daniel had bought, along with beans and the last of the salt pork. It was a simple meal, but they had both eaten with appetite. "I have been thinking," Daniel said, breaking the comfortable silence. "Your harvest is going to be good this year, better than you have had in a while, I would bet." "Thanks to you," Emma said. "Thanks to both of us," Daniel corrected. "But even with a good harvest, you are going to have trouble managing this place on your own once I leave." "Have you thought about what you will do?" Emma's heart sank at the mention of him leaving, though she knew this arrangement could not last forever. "I managed before," she said, though they both knew how poorly that had gone. "Barely," Daniel said bluntly. "And you would have died in that field if I had not come along. Emma, this is too much work for one person, especially during planting and harvest seasons." "I know," Emma admitted quietly, "but what choice do I have? I cannot afford to hire help, and I am not going to sell the only thing I have left of my family." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "There might be another option." "What option?" Emma asked. "You could marry me," Daniel said, his voice steady but with an undercurrent of nervousness. "We could run this farm together, proper partners. You would not be alone anymore, and I would have a place to call home instead of drifting from job to job." Emma stared at him, her mouth open in shock. Of all the things she had expected him to say, that was not one of them. "You want to marry me," she managed. "I do," Daniel said. He turned to face her fully, and even in the dim starlight she could see the sincerity in his eyes. "I know this is sudden, and I know we have not known each other that long, but Emma, I care about you. These past few weeks have been the happiest I have had in years. I like waking up knowing I am going to see you. I like working alongside you. I like talking with you in the evenings. I like who I am when I am with you." Emma's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. "But marriage," she said weakly. "That is such a big step." "It is," Daniel agreed. "And if you need time to think about it, I understand, but I wanted you to know how I feel. I am not asking you to love me right now. I am just asking you to give us a chance. We work well together. We are comfortable together. The rest can grow over time." Emma looked down at her hands, her mind racing. She had thought about marriage before, of course. What woman her age had not? But she had never expected to receive a proposal like this, so practical and yet so heartfelt at the same time. The sensible part of her brain was already listing all the reasons it made sense. With Daniel as her husband, the farm would thrive. She would have security, partnership, help with the endless work. She would not be alone anymore. But there was another part of her brain too, a part that whispered that she already cared for Daniel far more than was wise for someone she had known only a month. A part that said her heart had already made its choice, even if her head was still catching up. "I need to be honest with you," Emma said finally. "I do not just see you as a convenient solution to my problems, Daniel. These past weeks, I have grown to care for you. More than I probably should have in such a short time. I look forward to seeing you every morning. I think about you during the day. I feel happy in a way I have not felt since before my parents died. So if we do this, it would not just be a practical arrangement for me. I would want it to be real." Daniel's face lit up with a smile that transformed his features. "Emma Coleman, that is exactly what I wanted to hear," he said. He reached out and took her hand, his touch warm and solid. "I already care for you more than I knew I could care for anyone. I see a future with you, a real future. Not just as partners, but as husband and wife in every sense of the word." "Then yes," Emma said, squeezing his hand. "Yes, I will marry you." Daniel let out a whoop of joy and pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. Emma laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years, maybe ever. When he pulled back, his hands came up to frame her face, and he looked at her with such tenderness it made her breath catch. "Can I kiss you?" he asked softly. "Yes," Emma whispered. He kissed her gently, carefully, as if she were something precious that might break. Emma had never been kissed before, but she found herself responding instinctively, her hands coming up to rest on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palms. The kiss was sweet and full of promise, a beginning of something new and wonderful. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard, and Daniel was grinning like a fool. "I am going to be a good husband to you," he promised. "I am going to work hard and take care of you and make you happy." "I am going to be a good wife to you too," Emma said. "We are going to build something together, something good." They made plans that very night, sitting close together under the stars. They would get married as soon as possible, just a simple ceremony at the church in Hachita with a few witnesses. They would work the farm together and build it into something successful. Maybe eventually they could buy the land outright from the landlord instead of just renting. They talked about the future with an excitement neither of them had felt in years. 3 weeks later, on a warm September morning, Emma Coleman became Emma Morrison. The ceremony was small, held in the little wooden church in Hachita with the circuit preacher officiating. Emma wore her mother's best dress, which she had carefully altered to fit her smaller frame. Daniel wore new clothes he had bought specially for the occasion, and he looked so handsome it made Emma's heart flutter. Mrs. Patterson, who ran the general store, stood as Emma's witness, and Tom Crawford, the blacksmith who Daniel had befriended during his trips to town, stood for Daniel. The ceremony was simple but meaningful, and when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Daniel kissed Emma with such enthusiasm that Mrs. Patterson laughed, and Tom had to whistle and clap. After the ceremony, Mrs. Patterson and Tom insisted on treating them to lunch at the small restaurant in town, one of only 2 establishments in Hachita that served food. It was a luxury Emma had not experienced in years, and she savored every bite of the roast chicken and potatoes. Daniel held her hand under the table the entire time, and every time she looked at him, he was smiling at her with such obvious happiness that it made her blush. When they finally made it back to the farm in late afternoon, Daniel lifted Emma down from the wagon and then, to her surprise, swept her up into his arms again. "What are you doing?" Emma laughed. "Carrying my bride over the threshold," Daniel said. "It is tradition, is it not?" "We do not really have a threshold," Emma pointed out. "It is just a farmhouse." "It is our farmhouse now," Daniel said. "Our home, and I am going to carry you over the threshold properly." He carried her inside and set her down gently in the middle of the small room that was now their home. Emma looked around, seeing it with new eyes. It was still small and simple, but it did not feel lonely anymore. It felt warm and full of possibility. "I know it is not much," Emma said. "Not like what you are probably used to." "It is perfect," Daniel said, pulling her close, "because you are here." That night, they lay together in the narrow bed that Daniel had somehow managed to make sturdier and more comfortable in the weeks before the wedding. Emma rested her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat, feeling safe and cherished in a way she never had before. "Are you happy?" Daniel asked softly, his hand stroking her hair. "I am," Emma said, and she realized it was completely true. Despite all the hardship she had endured, despite the struggles that still lay ahead, she was genuinely happy. "Are you?" "Happier than I have ever been," Daniel said. He kissed the top of her head. "I love you, Emma Morrison." Emma's heart swelled with emotion. "I love you too, Daniel Morrison." The next few months proved that their decision to marry had been the right one. Working together, they brought in a harvest that exceeded Emma's wildest hopes. The corn was plentiful, the vegetables thrived, and they even had extra to sell at the market in addition to paying the landlord's share. With the money they earned, Daniel bought 2 young hens so they could have fresh eggs, and he began making plans for expanding the farm the following year. Winter came, and while money was still tight, it was nothing like the desperate poverty Emma had faced the year before. They had food stored up, wood for the fire, and most importantly, they had each other. On cold nights, they would lie together in bed and make plans for the future, dreams that felt achievable now that she was not alone. Daniel proved to be everything he had promised as a husband. He worked tirelessly on the farm, always making sure Emma was not overexerting herself. He was gentle and patient with her, taking time to learn what she liked and what made her happy. He made her laugh with his stories and held her when she had bad days and missed her parents. He was steady and reliable, and Emma fell more in love with him every single day. For his part, Daniel had found in Emma everything he had been searching for without knowing it. She was strong but not hardened, capable but willing to accept help, independent but welcoming of partnership. She was smart and funny, with a quiet strength that he admired deeply. She made their small farmhouse feel like a real home, and every day he thanked whatever force had led him to stop at her field that scorching day in July. As winter gave way to spring, they prepared for a new growing season. This time, they worked as true partners, making decisions together about what to plant and how to expand. Daniel had been talking to Tom Crawford and some of the other men in town, learning about irrigation techniques that might help them get more out of the land. Emma carefully saved seeds from their best crops and planned their vegetable garden with an eye toward both feeding themselves and having surplus to sell. One evening in late April, as they sat outside watching the sunset, Emma turned to Daniel with a nervous but excited expression on her face. "I have something to tell you," she said. Daniel turned to her immediately, concerned by her tone. "What is it? Are you all right?" "I am fine," Emma assured him. "Better than fine, actually. Daniel, I am going to have a baby." Daniel stared at her for a long moment, his expression going from confusion to understanding to pure joy in rapid succession. "A baby," he repeated. "Emma, are you sure?" "I am sure," Emma said, laughing at his reaction. "I have not had my monthly courses in 2 months, and I have been feeling sick in the mornings. Mrs. Patterson noticed when I was in town last week and asked me about it. She has had 5 children of her own, so she knows the signs." Daniel let out a whoop of joy very similar to the one he had made when Emma agreed to marry him. He pulled her into his arms, holding her carefully as if she might break. "We are going to have a baby," he said wonderingly. "Emma, we are going to be parents. Are you happy?" Emma asked, though his reaction made the answer obvious. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Daniel said. He pulled back to look at her, his eyes shining. "I am going to be a father. You are going to be a mother. We are going to have a family, Emma, a real family." Emma felt tears of happiness roll down her cheeks. "I was so scared to tell you," she admitted. "I know money is still tight, and a baby is another mouth to feed, and I will not be able to work as hard when I get further along." "Do not even think about that," Daniel said firmly. "We will manage. We always do. Emma, this baby is a blessing, not a burden. We are going to figure it out together, just like we have figured out everything else." That night, they lay in bed talking about the future in a way they had not before. They discussed names, wondering if it would be a boy or a girl. They talked about how they would need to expand the house before the baby came, maybe add a second room. Daniel was already planning in his head how he would build a proper cradle, something sturdy and safe for their child. "I want our children to have a better life than we did," Emma said softly. "I want them to have enough to eat, a warm home, and parents who love them." "They will have all that and more," Daniel promised. "I am going to work every day to give them the best life I can. They are going to grow up knowing they are loved and wanted." The pregnancy progressed well, though Emma did struggle with morning sickness for the first few months. Daniel was attentive and caring, making sure she ate even when she did not feel like it, bringing her water when she was sick, and taking on even more of the physical labor around the farm. He would not let her do any heavy lifting, and while Emma sometimes chafed at being treated so carefully, she also appreciated his concern. As her belly grew, so did their preparations. True to his word, Daniel built an addition onto the farmhouse, a small second room that would serve as a bedroom for them, allowing the baby to have the main room where it was warmer. He built a beautiful cradle from oak wood that Tom Crawford had helped him get at a good price, sanding it smooth and making sure there were no rough edges that could harm delicate baby skin. Emma sewed baby clothes from fabric that Mrs. Patterson had given her, along with some soft blankets that would keep the baby warm. The other women in Hachita, seeing that Emma was expecting, became more friendly and welcoming. Mrs. Patterson in particular took Emma under her wing, sharing advice and giving her hand-me-down baby items from her own children. Emma had been so isolated for so long that this sense of community was almost overwhelming, and she often found herself tearing up at the kindness of these women who had previously been just acquaintances. In November, 3 days after Emma's 23rd birthday, their son was born. It was a long and difficult labor that lasted through the night and into the next day. Mrs. Patterson and another experienced midwife, Mrs. Chen, attended her while Daniel paced outside, nearly wearing a hole in the ground with his worry. When he finally heard the baby's first cry, he burst into the house without waiting for permission. Emma lay exhausted in the bed, her hair plastered to her forehead with sweat, but she was smiling as she held a tiny bundle wrapped in one of the blankets she had made. "Daniel, come meet your son," she said, her voice tired but full of joy. Daniel approached slowly, almost reverently, and looked down at the tiny red face peeking out from the blankets. His son. Their son. He had never seen anything so small or so perfect in his entire life. The baby had a shock of dark hair, and when he briefly opened his eyes, they were dark blue like his father's. "Can I hold him?" Daniel asked, his voice choked with emotion. Emma carefully transferred the baby into Daniel's arms, showing him how to support the head. Daniel held his son as if he were made of spun glass, staring down at him with wonder and love. "He is perfect," Daniel said. "Emma, he is absolutely perfect." "He is," Emma agreed. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy but had not settled on anything definite. Now, holding his son, Daniel said, "What about Henry? After your father?" Emma's eyes filled with tears. "You would do that?" she asked. "Name him after my father." "Your father would be proud of you, Emma," Daniel said. "Of everything you have survived and accomplished, it would be an honor to name our son after him." "Henry Morrison," Emma said, testing the name. "I like it. Henry Daniel Morrison." "Henry Daniel," Daniel repeated, surprised. "So he has his father's name too," Emma said. "The two best men I know." Daniel leaned down carefully, mindful of the baby in his arms, and kissed his wife. "I love you so much," he said. "Thank you for our son. Thank you for this family." Life with a baby was both harder and more rewarding than either of them had anticipated. Henry was a good baby for the most part, but he still needed constant care and attention. Emma handled most of the nighttime feedings since she was nursing him, but Daniel would get up with her, keeping her company and bringing her water or anything else she needed. During the day, Daniel would take the baby when Emma needed to rest or tend to other tasks, walking around the farm with his son in his arms and telling him about everything they passed. "You see that cornfield, Henry?" Daniel would say, as if the 3-month-old could understand. "That is where your mama and I grow the corn that feeds us. Someday, when you are bigger, you are going to help us tend it, but for now, you just need to grow strong and healthy." Emma would watch them from the window and feel her heart overflow with love for both of them. This life she had now, this family, was more than she had ever dreamed possible during those dark days when she had been alone and sick and desperate. Sometimes she could barely believe it was real. As Henry grew from an infant into a baby and then into a toddler, the farm continued to thrive. Each harvest was better than the last, and slowly but surely, Daniel and Emma began to save money. They talked about their dream of buying the land outright, and what had once seemed impossible began to feel achievable. When Henry was 2 years old, Emma became pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, and she did not suffer from as much morning sickness. Daniel was just as attentive as he had been the first time, maybe more so now that he knew what to expect. Henry, oblivious to the changes coming, toddled around the farm and followed his father everywhere, already showing signs of being a farmer like his parents. Their daughter was born on a warm day in May, an easier birth than Henry had been. They named her Sarah Grace Morrison, and she had Emma's lighter hair and Daniel's blue eyes. Henry was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to touch her and hold her constantly, though he was sometimes too rough and had to be reminded to be gentle. With 2 young children, life became even busier, but it was a good kind of busy. Their days were full of laughter and love, of small triumphs and occasional challenges. The farm continued to grow, and finally, When Henry was 4 and Sarah was 2, Daniel and Emma had saved enough money to make an offer to the landlord for the property. The negotiation took weeks, but finally, they reached an agreement. The day Daniel signed the deed that made the farm officially theirs, he rode home as fast as his horse would carry him. Emma was in the garden with the children when she heard him approaching. She stood up, shading her eyes against the sun, and saw the look on his face. "We got it," Daniel said, dismounting in one smooth motion. "Emma, we got it. The land is ours. The farm is ours. No more paying rent to anyone. This is our home legally and officially for us and for our children and for their children after them." Emma let out a cry of joy and ran to him, the children following close behind. Daniel swept her up and spun her around, both of them laughing. When he set her down, he pulled the deed from his coat and showed it to her. There, in black and white, were their names, Daniel Morrison and Emma Morrison, landowners. "We did it," Emma said, tears streaming down her face. "We actually did it. We did it together," Daniel said. He looked down at Henry and Sarah, who were watching their parents with wide eyes. "And this is all for them, for their future." That night, after the children were asleep, Emma and Daniel sat outside under the stars like they had on so many nights before. Emma leaned against her husband, feeling contentment settle deep in her bones. "You remember the day we met?" Emma asked. "When I was sick in the field and you stopped." "I remember every detail," Daniel said. "You were so stubborn, insisting you had to keep working even though you could barely stand. I thought you were going to fall over right there." "I was so angry when you picked me up and carried me inside," Emma admitted. "I did not want to need anyone's help." "I know," Daniel said with a chuckle. "You made that very clear, but I am glad I did not listen to you." "So am I," Emma said. She turned to look at him. "You saved my life that day, Daniel, not just from the illness but from the loneliness and the hopelessness. You gave me a reason to keep going, to keep fighting. You gave me love and partnership and a family. You gave me everything." "You gave me just as much," Daniel said. He kissed her forehead. "Before I met you, I was just drifting, going from job to job with no real purpose. You gave me a home, Emma. A real home, not just a place to sleep. You gave me love and children and a reason to work toward something better. We saved each other." Emma smiled, thinking about how true that was. They had both been lost in their own ways when they met, and somehow they had found each other at exactly the right moment. It was the kind of love story that people wrote songs about, except it was real, and it was theirs. Over the next several years, their family continued to grow. They had 2 more children, a daughter named Lucy and another son named William. Their farm prospered, becoming one of the more successful operations in the area. Daniel expanded into raising cattle in addition to crops, and Emma started selling her preserves and baked goods in town, earning extra money that went into a fund for the children's futures. Henry grew into a strong, capable boy who loved working alongside his father. He was serious and thoughtful, with Emma's quiet determination and Daniel's steady nature. Sarah was bright and curious, always asking questions and wanting to learn everything. Lucy was gentle and kind, often found caring for the animals or helping her mother in the garden. William, the youngest, was adventurous and bold, keeping everyone on their toes with his antics. As the children grew, Emma and Daniel made sure to instill in them the values that had gotten them through the hardest times: hard work, perseverance, kindness, and the importance of family. They told the children stories about their grandparents, keeping their memories alive. They taught them to be grateful for what they had while always striving to do better. The years passed in a blur of seasons, each one bringing its own challenges and joys. There were hard years when the crops did not produce as well, and they had to tighten their belts and make sacrifices. There were good years when the harvests were plentiful, and they could afford small luxuries. Through it all, Daniel and Emma faced everything together, their love growing deeper and stronger with each passing year. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Daniel took Emma into town for a rare night away from the farm, leaving the older children in charge of the younger ones for a few hours. They had dinner at the restaurant where they had celebrated their wedding day, and afterwards, Daniel presented Emma with a gift, a beautiful silver locket on a chain. "Open it," Daniel said, watching her face. Emma opened the locket and found two tiny photographs inside, one of Daniel and one of her. "Where did you get these?" she asked, amazed. Photographs were expensive and not something they had ever indulged in. "I went to the photographer in Las Cruces last month when I was there selling cattle," Daniel explained. "I wanted you to have something special, something you could keep close to your heart like you keep me close to your heart." Emma threw her arms around him, not caring that they were in public. "I love it," she said. "I love you, Daniel Morrison. You are the best thing that ever happened to me." "Right back at you, Emma Morrison," Daniel said, holding her tight. As they walked back to the wagon, hand in hand, Emma reflected on how much her life had changed since that day 10 years ago when Daniel had found her sick in the field. She had been hopeless then, sure she was going to lose everything and end up with nothing. Now she had a thriving farm, a beautiful family, and a love that filled every corner of her heart. "What are you thinking about?" Daniel asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. "Just how lucky I am," Emma said. "How lucky we both are." "It was not luck," Daniel said. "It was fate. We were meant to find each other, Emma. I truly believe that." "So do I," Emma agreed. "So do I." The years continued to unfold, bringing with them the normal ups and downs of life. The children grew into young adults, each finding their own path while remaining close to the family. Henry took over more and more of the farm operations, showing a natural aptitude for the work and a dedication that made both Emma and Daniel proud. Sarah married a kind young man from a neighboring farm and stayed in the area, giving Emma and Daniel their first grandchildren. Lucy became a teacher at the small school in Hachita, educating the next generation. William, true to his adventurous nature, joined a cattle outfit and spent several years seeing the wider world before eventually returning home. Through it all, Daniel and Emma remained the heart of the family, the foundation on which everything else was built. They aged together gracefully, their hair turning gray, lines forming around their eyes from years of squinting in the sun and laughing together. They still worked the farm, though they had help now from Henry and some hired hands. They still sat outside in the evenings and watched the sunset, still talked about their dreams and plans. On their 25th wedding anniversary, the entire family gathered at the farm for a celebration. The house, which had been expanded several times over the years, was filled with children, grandchildren, and friends. There was food and music and dancing. And as Emma looked around at all the people she loved, all the life that had grown from that single moment when a cowboy had stopped to help a sick woman in a field, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. Daniel found her standing on the porch, watching everyone through the window. He came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. "Happy anniversary, my love," he said, kissing her cheek. "Happy anniversary," Emma replied, covering his hands with her own. "Can you believe it has been 25 years? Some days it feels like a lifetime," Daniel said. "Other days, it feels like it was just yesterday that I rode past your field and saw a stubborn woman who refused to stop working despite being sick as a dog." Emma laughed. "And you were a bossy cowboy who would not take no for an answer." "Best decision I ever made," Daniel said. stopping that day, insisting on helping you, falling in love with you. Every good thing in my life started with that moment." "Mine too," Emma said. She turned in his arms to face him. "You told me to rest and let you provide, and I fought you on it because I was too proud and too scared to accept help. But you were right, Daniel. Sometimes we need someone to help us, to share the load. And you have been sharing mine for 25 years now." "Just like you have been sharing mine," Daniel said. "We are a team, Emma, we always have been. From that very first day we have been partners." "Partners," Emma agreed, "in work, in love, in life. I cannot imagine having done any of this without you." "You would have found a way," Daniel said. "You are the strongest person I know, but I am awfully glad you did not have to do it alone." They kissed, a gentle kiss full of love and shared history and the promise of more years to come. Inside, someone called for them to come cut the anniversary cake, and they went in together, hand in hand, to celebrate with the family they had built together. As the years continued to pass, Emma and Daniel eventually stepped back from the day-to-day operations of the farm, leaving it in Henry's capable hands. They spent their days taking care of the grandchildren when needed, tending the smaller garden near the house, and enjoying the fruits of their lifetime of labor. They took pleasure in the simple things, watching the sunrise together, sitting on the porch in their rocking chairs, taking slow walks around the property that was theirs, truly theirs, paid for with their own sweat and determination. On their 40th wedding anniversary, the family gathered again for another celebration. There were more grandchildren now, and even a few great-grandchildren. Emma was 62 and Daniel was 66, both still healthy and active despite their years. They sat together at the head of the long table that Henry had built for the occasion, and Emma looked at Daniel with the same love she had felt all those years ago. 40 years, she said softly, so only he could hear. Who would have thought that scared, sick woman and the drifting cowboy would make it 40 years? I would have, Daniel said with a smile. The moment I looked into your eyes, I knew you were special. I knew you were going to change my life. You changed mine, Emma said. You saved it, really. And then you made it beautiful. We made it beautiful together, Daniel corrected. He raised his glass. To 40 more years. I will drink to that, Emma said, clinking her glass against his. The celebration went late into the night, with stories and laughter and love flowing freely. When everyone had finally gone home or gone to bed, Emma and Daniel made their way to their room, the same room Daniel had built all those years ago when Emma was pregnant with Henry. They got ready for bed slowly, moving with the careful deliberation of people whose bodies had been well used over a lifetime of hard work. As they lay together in bed, Daniel pulled Emma close, and she rested her head on his shoulder, a position so familiar and comfortable it was like coming home. "Daniel," Emma said softly. "Yes, love, thank you," she said, "for everything, for stopping that day, for being stubborn enough not to listen when I told you to go away, for asking me to marry you, for 40 years of love and partnership and family, for making my life so much more than I ever thought it could be." Daniel tightened his arms around her. "Emma, loving you has been the greatest privilege of my life," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Every day I have spent with you has been a gift. You have made me a better man than I ever would have been without you. You have given me a family, a home, a purpose. You have given me everything that matters." They lay there in the darkness, holding each other, two people who had found each other against all odds and built a life together that was richer and fuller than either could have imagined. Outside, the New Mexico night was quiet except for the sound of crickets and the occasional call of an owl. Inside, Emma and Daniel drifted off to sleep together, content in the knowledge that they had lived well, loved deeply, and created something lasting. The years that followed were golden ones. Daniel and Emma grew older with grace, surrounded by the love of their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. They remained active and engaged, still walking the farm every day, still sitting together in the evenings, still very much in love. Their story became part of the family lore, told and retold to the younger generations as an example of how love and hard work and determination could overcome any obstacle. When Emma was 68, she fell ill during a harsh winter. It was nothing like the fever that had nearly killed her all those years ago, but at her age, any illness was serious. Daniel barely left her side, caring for her with the same devotion he had shown that first time she was sick. He brought her soup and water, kept the fire burning to keep her warm, and held her hand through the worst of it. "You are not allowed to leave me," Daniel told her one night when her fever was particularly high. "Do you hear me, Emma Morrison? We made a deal 42 years ago, and I am holding you to it. We are going to grow old together, and we are not done yet." Emma, even in her illness, managed a weak smile. "Bossy cowboy," she whispered. "Stubborn woman," Daniel replied, but his voice was gentle. "Please get better, Emma. I am not ready to be without you." "I am not ready to leave you either," Emma said. She squeezed his hand. "I will fight this, Daniel, I promise." And she did. Emma fought her way back to health with the same determination she had shown throughout her life. It took weeks, but slowly she recovered her strength. By spring, she was back to her normal activities, though Daniel insisted she take things easier than before. "I am not an invalid," Emma protested when Daniel tried to stop her from working in the garden. "I know," Daniel said, "but humor me. Let me take care of you a little bit. You spent so many years taking care of everyone else. Let someone take care of you." Emma looked at him, at the love and concern in his eyes, and her resistance melted. "All right," she said, "but only because you asked so nicely." They spent that spring and summer enjoying every moment, knowing that their time was precious. They took walks together every day, visited with the grandchildren, and spent long evenings on the porch talking about everything and nothing. They reminisced about the early days, laughed about the challenges they had faced, and marveled at how blessed they had been. One evening in late summer, as they sat watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, Emma turned to Daniel and said, "I want you to know that if I could go back and live my life over again, I would not change a single thing. Every hardship, every struggle, every moment of fear and uncertainty, it all led me to you, and you have made it all worthwhile." Daniel took her hand, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "I feel the same way," he said. "My life truly began the day I met you, Emma. Everything before that was just prelude. You are my great love, my partner, my everything. I am the luckiest man who ever lived because I got to spend my life with you." They sat together until the stars came out, holding hands and watching the night settle over the land that was theirs, the land where their children and grandchildren would continue to build their lives. It was a moment of perfect peace and contentment, the kind that comes from a life well lived and a love well earned. Daniel and Emma spent another 5 beautiful years together, years filled with love and family and the simple joys of everyday life. They celebrated their 47th wedding anniversary, surrounded by 4 generations of the family they had created. They took joy in watching the youngest great-grandchildren play in the yard where their own children had once played. They held hands and shared kisses and told each other, "I love you," every single day. When Emma was 73, she passed away peacefully in her sleep, with Daniel holding her hand. She went from this world to the next without pain, simply closing her eyes and not opening them again. Daniel, devastated by the loss of his beloved wife, nevertheless took comfort in knowing that they had been together until the very end, and that she had not suffered. At her funeral, Daniel stood and told the story of how they met, how he had found her sick in the field and she had tried to send him away, how he had insisted on helping her despite her protests. He spoke of their 47 years together, of the farm they had built, the children they had raised, the life they had created from nothing. "Emma was the strongest person I ever knew," Daniel said, his voice breaking. "She survived things that would have broken other people. She worked harder than anyone I have ever met. She loved with her whole heart, and she made my life infinitely better just by being in it. I will miss her every day for the rest of my life, but I will also be grateful every day that I got to love her and be loved by her." Daniel lived for 2 more years after Emma's death, years that were harder and lonelier than anything he had experienced before. But he was surrounded by the family they had built together, and he found purpose in helping with the farm and spending time with his children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. He told them stories about Emma, keeping her memory alive, making sure they understood what an extraordinary woman she had been. When Daniel passed away at the age of 78, peacefully in his sleep just as Emma had, the family buried him next to her on a hill overlooking the farm they had built together. On their shared headstone, Henry had carved their names and a simple inscription: "Together they built a life. Together they rest in peace." The farm remained in the family for generations after, each new generation adding their own touches but always remembering the foundation that Daniel and Emma had laid. The story of how they met, of the stubborn woman who worked herself nearly to death and the cowboy who refused to let her face the world alone, became family legend, told and retold around dinner tables and passed down through the years. Their love story was the kind that defied the hardships of the Wild West, proving that even in the harshest conditions, love could take root and flourish. From that single moment when Daniel Morrison stopped his horse and saw Emma Coleman struggling in the field, a family dynasty was born, a farm was built, and a love story for the ages was written. The land they had claimed and worked and eventually owned flourished under the care of their descendants. The house that Daniel had expanded with his own hands still stood, renovated and modernized but with the original structure preserved. The fields that Emma had tended while sick, where Daniel had insisted she rest and let him provide, continued to produce crops year after year. And on that hill where they were buried together, wildflowers grew every spring, a natural memorial to a love that had been as enduring as the land itself. In the end, Emma and Daniel's story was one of survival, determination, partnership, and most of all, love. It was a story about 2 people who found each other at exactly the right moment, who chose each other every single day, and who built something beautiful together despite all the obstacles in their path. It was a story that reminded everyone who heard it that love, real love, is worth fighting for, worth working for, and worth everything. Their descendants, now numbering in the dozens, carried forward the values Emma and Daniel had instilled: hard work, perseverance, family loyalty, and the kind of love that weathers all storms. The Morrison farm in Hachita, New Mexico, stood as a testament to what 2 people could accomplish when they refused to give up, when they supported each other through every hardship, and when they loved with everything they had. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the sun was setting over the fields and the air was still and peaceful, those who knew the story swore they could still feel the presence of Emma and Daniel, still watching over the land and the family they had created, still together even in death as they had been in life, their love story complete, their legacy secure, their happy ending achieved not just in one moment, but in every moment they had shared and in every generation that followed after them.